Hello, my name is Russ Yukon. I'm an ISU Extension Beef Specialist. As part of a series on looking at different types of feedlot facilities, today we want to talk about manure value from different types of facilities, mainly open lot and confinement. Certainly this gets discussed quite a bit, the value that we can obtain from facilities and how that relates to investment in those facilities. So today we're going to try and look at some numbers to investigate what the value is and compare that from different types of facilities. With an open feedlot and having more space and manure exposed to more elements, we tend to get more loss of nutrients. We also can have more runoff, but hopefully we can contain that through different types of structures and management. But in general, we harvest less manure, harvest less nutrients with open feedlot, but of course less investment as well. With a deep confinement or any kind of confinement, the manure is not spread out as much. We have less surface area per head there, and we're able to capture more nutrients from less loss. Plus, in a confinement, they're not running off, so we could harvest more as well. Harvest more nutrients and harvest more manure in a confinement. And when we go to a pit confinement with slatted floors, probably a little less volatilization of N, and we'll look at some of those numbers here in a little bit. So in general, open lots, we can have different locations in the lot, may have different nutrient concentration. Certainly it could vary by operation and how we're managing that, and season would affect that as well. So kind of the bottom line on all these different types of facilities is we have to actually sample the manure and get it analyzed to figure out what the nutrient concentration is. Bedded confinement may be a little bit more consistent, even though we have maybe different deposition of manure in the building. We did some work a few years ago that did show that it was consistent between those different areas shown there. Differences between operation, time of year did affect concentration as well. So again, we kind of need to sample manure to make sure we know what we got. Similar situation on a liquid pit confinement, and try to get that agitated, primarily to get what the phosphorus concentration is, and then any added water needs to be looked at in that sample too, if we're adding water before pumping. And again, just sample the manure to make sure we know what the nutrient concentration is. This 2014 feedlot survey that was done in Iowa by the Iowa Beef Center showed that not many, in fact only a third, sampled and tested manure, and 40% calibrated spreaders for application. So probably something that needs to be paid closer attention to when we start talking about trying to get value of nutrients or value of manure. When we look at management factors, certainly the type of housing, type of manure storage, how much bedding's being used, type of cattle, pen density, season, the ration, all those types of things are going to influence the nutrient content of manure. So the bottom line is we're going to have some variables. The biggest one is moisture. A lot of that can be seasonal versus winter versus a summertime type situation. The amount of bedding being used, and then in an open lot, how much added soil. Obviously, in a liquid pit situation, we eliminate some of that, so probably a little bit more consistent with a liquid pit or a bedded confinement than an open lot. So, again, our moisture differences need to be taken into account between those different types of facilities as well. So kind of the main point of all that discussion, we need to sample and test manure to make sure we know what the nutrients are. One analysis is about $30 to get the moisture and the NP and K, and it's good money spent as long as we're taking good representative samples of the facility that we're looking at, and then we're keeping records of what the variability could be by source and season, so we can take that into account when we're trying to apply manure and get the most value out of it. Again, sampling solid manure may not be the most accurate, especially when we look at variability, but we try to get a good representative sample from several different places in the lot and take a subsample of that after we mix it together We could sample out in the field after application, maybe doing that during calibration, as you can see there in the lower left, or if we're sampling from a pile or a stockpile, if we will, making sure we're getting a good representative sample of what's in that stockpile and not maybe what's exposed on the surface. Another part of manure value is what's being utilized out in the field. Certainly different locations or different states or individuals might have different interpretations of this. We're using 100% availability of phosphorus and potassium if the soil test is medium or higher, and most cases that would be. On N, 30 to 40% first year availability of N from beef manure, 10% of that N the second year, and 5% in the third year after application. Some of that nitrogen just doesn't become available and is tied up in organic matter. So let's look at some numbers here, and again realize that these nutrient concentrations and volumes may vary from operation to operation. We've pulled these from several different sources, and this is kind of a best estimate based on those sources. So again, volume between the three types of facilities, the open lot, the bedded barn, and deep pit, 3 tons, 5 tons, and 2,500 gallon. And this is on a per space per year basis. And then you can see the nutrient concentrations per ton or per 1,000 gallons for each type of storage or facility, if you will. And then the total amount of nutrients in red is the volume times the per ton concentration of nutrients. So certainly more in the deep pit, where we're not losing as much and being able to capture more of the nutrients and the manure. Slightly less in the bedded barn, particularly for nitrogen. And then the open lot, certainly less on nitrogen and about half on the phosphorus and potassium as well. Certainly none of those facilities capture everything that's excreted. Again, the excreted nutrients there would be just raw manure. We certainly lose some of those nutrients when it's excreted fresh and when we're actually pumping or harvesting that manure for our field application. Then if we put some values on those nutrients, and you can see what we use down there at the bottom of the slide, we can see the different values there in total value, almost 3 times as much in deep pit as an open lot, and in between on the deep bedded. We put some estimated hauling cost on there, a little higher for the deep pit and the deep bedded, since we're hauling more material, and then what the net is per year. So a significant amount of value there, about $30 more per year from the deep pit using our estimates. Does that pay for the increased investment in the deep pit? Well, we'll look at it in one way for a minute, but we also have to realize that we have to utilize all those nutrients. And also it's not necessarily $50 increased value with a deep pit over an open lot. It's $30 increased value. So the nutrients in an open lot have value as well. If we look at comparing this to different cropping systems, just using 15 tons per acre application rate or 5,000 gallons application rate from a bedded confinement or liquid pit, you can see what the nutrients applied would be as compared to requirements or needs of different crops being grown. In most cases, we're over-applying phosphorus and potassium and not applying all the nitrogen that we need. And since we're over-applying P and K to get that full value, we're typically going to be applying to fields over a 3 to maybe 4 year period, and then applying some commercial nitrogen along with that to make sure we're utilizing all the P and K that's being applied. If we just look at it on a per ton basis, this would be bedded type facility, looking at the amount per ton that we'll be looking at. It's about $15 per ton, and again we said about 5 tons, so per space per year, so again $75. This just is a breakdown of a table that we have in our Feedlot Systems Manual, which can be downloaded from the Iowa State Extension's store, looking at that value per head per year of the manure, and then breaking that down to what that amounts to in a dollar per pound of gain basis. Again, we're using the same cost of nutrients, same availabilities, and you can see that on a cost to gain basis, we're gaining about 7 cents from the confinement, about 2.5 cents from an open lot type situation. So if we look at this and just look in the blue bars here, what our cost of gain per pound, again, that we estimated in the Feedlot Systems Manual, and then we take that manure value per pound of gain that we just looked at and subtract that from the cost per pound of gain and look at a net cost per pound of gain. It makes the different facilities look pretty similar, whereas a slatted for confinement, even factoring a little better performance, was still maybe about 88 cents per pound of gain. If we factor in that extra manure value, it becomes much closer to the open lot type of facilities there. But again, not necessarily better, but similar. The other thing to consider then is making sure we're utilizing all the nutrients, is making sure we can get good application rates and uniform application. So we need uniform spread across the pattern along the direction of travel, and then actually knowing what the application rate is and making sure that's similar across the field. So calibrating spreaders is certainly important to do. Solid manure, again, we can lay out some plastic sheets or trays to capture area and then calibrate what the tonnage per acre is, but it's certainly essential to get the full value of manure. So this has been Russ Yukon with talking about manure value from different facilities today. And again, if you want more information, I would suggest you look at the publications we mentioned, particularly the Feedlot Systems Manual, and view the other videos that we have on feedlot facilities that are linked in the same location as this one.